don't want people to think that you remained a starving artist, because one of the things I said we haven't talked about before on the show, and we got to talk about is that was like in Memphis, that was like 81-ish, 82-ish, but by another 3 or 4 or 5 years, you and Tommy Rogers as the Fantastics, you were working Mid-South, you were working Tennessee, but also you started working Japan for All Japan, for Giant Baba. And, everybody knows Mrs. Baba just passed away, and that's sort of like an end of an era over there. But at least you guys were making, and I've talked about this before, the guys that were going to work for Baba in the 80s were a lot of times were making more money than any territory per week than any territory would pay over here. Now, you went over and back, but tell me, how did you first get booked over there? How did you get started?
Well, what happened was, you remember Tokyo Joe Diego?
Yeah.
You remember that name? The guy that had the one leg. He would come to Crockett shows, and I talked to him. He said, "You guys are on Baba's list. I can't even talk to you." I said, "What?" He said, "You never come to New Japan. Baba's already picked you guys." I said, "But we've never been to Japan. We're interested in going." He said, "But you don't understand. Do you remember when they had the big war when Brody and them, they were in mid-tour, and Stan Hansen and Abdullah and them, they were jumping and Jimmy Snook and them, they were jumping from office back and forth to office. Well, then they finally had an agreement, and apparently what they did was, in this agreement, they even picked people before they even came.
Just the guys working the territories in America, they say, "Okay, you can have this one, and I'll take that."
Yes, they picked who they wanted eventually, and apparently because that Tokyo Joe told me, he said, "You're on Giant Baba's," and they knew the list, and he said, "You're on Giant Baba's list." So what happened when me and Tommy finished up with WCW during George Scott's infamous reign? I called Lord Blears, Tally Ho Blears, and I talked to him. I said, "We'd love to go." He said, "They'd love to have you," and he said, "It's going to be great." And I guess he knew we were on that list, and we got booked straight away over there. And like you said, the money was good. I think we went for a month at a time, and
the guys that went for Baba, because Inoki did shorter tours in those days, but the guys that went for Baba would go over for like 4 weeks at a time, and they'd do the whole tour for a month, and then you come back and they'd take a couple weeks off, and they'd start a new tour with other guys.
Yes, and the funny thing of it was even before that, like that IWEA that was over there, they would have 7 and 8 weeks. That would be tough, but yeah, we would go over there for a month at a time and wrestle. And we got a chance to wrestle the British Bulldogs, Dynamite Kid, who I'd met first in Calgary, and I thought he was one of the greatest. As a matter of fact, Jimmy, after I'd left Calgary and came to Jarrett's, you showed me the matches. I'd never seen him of Tiger Masking him. Remember, you had him on the beta or whatever, and I was watching them there. But Dynamite Kid and Davey Boy Smith, and of course the Malenkos, Joe and Dean Malenko, and they had a lot of great talent in Japan, and the work rate was a lot different. I mean, there was no clapping or this or that or whatever. It was just a different style totally. And
I always remember that Bobby and Stan, whenever you guys came back from Japan, Bobby and Stan would cower in the corner and go, "Jesus Christ, would y'all slow down? You're not Japan anymore. Look, grab a hold."
Yeah, it was it's a different style. It was a different style and everything, and I always loved going, of course, because of all that we had heard about it and everything. And Giant Baba was a great. I got a chance. I consider Paul Bosch one of the greats as far as promoters, and Giant Baba as well. His word was his bond as far as I'm concerned. Other people might say different things. And I'll never forget one time I'd cut my hair off dark. And I went with dark hair for some stupid reason. And I was getting off the plane or getting to the arena, and he would watch. He said, "Is that the original Bobby Fulton?" He said, "That's not the original, is it?" He thought somebody had shifted. So they sprayed my hair, Jimmy, and sprayed my hair and tried to turn it because my hair is so hard to turn. They turned it green for photos. And I said, They never used them. One picture, though, I look like a green-haired, the way I'm posed and this and that, and the light blue trunks.
It could have been an Irish
look
gimmick.
Like Bruno Sammartino.
It could have been an Irish gimmick.
Yeah, I should have done that. Anyway, I could have went and got the top hat and this and that. But in Japan, we had a lot of great matches. But also, that was the place where Tommy Rogers had Danny Spivey do a dive over the top rope, and Tommy put his knees up, and Tommy at 195, Danny at 325. Danny 6'7", his legs caught the top rope, so all of his weight came down on Tommy's knees. And when it did, it ripped the muscle stomach lining inside and hurt him. Then Tommy was in the ring working out, and he went to do a gainer into the ring. Before the crowd got in, he wanted to see if he could do it.
Oh, no.
And he burned his face up on the mat. And then he went to do it again, and he was staggering around. I said, man, don't do that again. And the office came running out. Ricky Dozan's son, Ricky Momoda, we called him, came running out. No. But it was too late. Tommy had already broke his neck, which he continued on the tour with a broken neck. And his face was all burnt from hitting that canvas, like he did, and this and that. And it just seemed like then at that point that, there's a lot when you're wrestling at that pace, there's a lot more injuries and a lot of things. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah. Well, and also he pulled a Jericho. He hurt his own self in an empty ring too. But
yes. Now I didn't know about Jericho doing that.
You weren't there that night in Knoxville. Jericho goes out before him and Storm are going to wrestle the Heavenly Bodies. Jericho goes out that afternoon to practice the Shooting Star Press and breaks his arm.
Oh no!
Comes back and works the match with an inflatable cast on, and then has surgery. And he's that was his Smoky Mountain career. Boom!
Wow, I never knew that.
But hey, here's the thing, though. You guys were over there for years, on and off, from like the late '80s through mid '90s. How many actual different tours did? Because like Hanson. When I did the interview with him, it was 100 and something or whatever times he's been over there. Yeah. But how many trips did you guys make? Because I know you we had went totally about 17 times. That's what we had ended up doing then, because I think we missed a couple of years in the middle somehow. But and I think it was 17. I think totally that we did, and each time we went was a month. So. It was great, and like I said, the work money back then also, because you guys, a lot of weeks, you would go over there, you'd make more money than we were making in our days for Crockett. Sure. Sure. I think you guys got up $5-6 grand a week apiece, did you not?
Yes, sir.
And because they rewarded loyalty, when you kept going back, you kept getting raises. Right,
and they were, like I said, they treated you really good. They, as long as you did your job, they that's what they wanted, and to go out and work hard. And then eventually I started training some of the younger Japanese guys. So when I would go, I would get in the ring and teach the young guys. And Baba would have me ask me, would you please go to the ring and work out with the young guys and teach them? And we would teach them the style, the kind of like the American type style. I mean, wrestling though, you know what I'm saying.
Well, because Baba always his promotion was more Americanized, because I think wasn't that the root of a lot of the heat? And Inoki never got over in the States, whereas Baba did. They pushed him right, and he was a star, and Inoki was kind of blah. So Inoki went more with the European and Calgary style, and Baba went more with like guys like the Funks that worked the classic American style.
Right. Well, as a matter of fact, they both came out of the dojo at the same time, I think. Yeah. So there was always a rivalry there. So when Ricky Dozan, Japan Wrestling, when Ricky Dozan got killed, they both started companies, I believe, then. And I think the Destroyer went with Baba, if I'm not mistaken. He got some of the stars that were established. And then there was that war we talked about earlier where they were just like, they would be in the middle of a tour for Giant Baba, and the next day they would be working for New Japan, and vice versa.
Brody and I forget the first jump, and Brian, I know you can probably do this from heart, but basically involved in it were guys like Brody and Abdullah and in Hanson and later on the Road Warriors, where those guys got up to $10,000-$15,000 a week and more, and jumping bonuses and signing bonuses, and we're talking 30 years ago. So this was,
that's right.
You know, here's another thing. Do you watch much of Japanese wrestling today? Do you watch the New Japan show on Access? They've Americanized even the Japanese product now.
Yep, and as a matter of fact, I met the one guy in New Orleans that has his hair shaved. It's like the champion. And I didn't. Do you know who I'm talking about? Dylan, what's his name?
Help us, Brian.
That guy.
The head shave. You're not talking about Minoru Suzuki, are you?
Minoru Suzuki. And I met him. And when they told him because I don't have the blonde hair and I'm older, when they told him who I was, he got a picture taken with me. He used to sneak into the matches. He used to sneak in, and I mean sneak, not pay. He would sneak into the matches to watch us wrestle.
Oh, as a matter of fact, he was on the show that I was on in England year before last. And and they almost lost him at the train station. That could have been ugly. But as far as the current product, do you watch much? Because really, New Japan is the same. Well, I figured that, but New Japan is the last vestige of the glory days. But even then, they've Americanized everything so much, because when business was huge in Japan in the 80s and 90s. They treated it even more seriously than they treated it in America. And there were finishes, and there was logic, and there wasn't run-ins and hoo-ha and stuff behind the referee's back. And it seemed like that was a great place to see these dream matches with the top talent, and you didn't have to go through all the falderall. But now it's kind of the same thing as they do here.
Right. Well, back then, just real quick, digressing for a second, when we got over there, we would throw a guy back in the ring and the people would pop big, because they were used to having countouts prior to the 80s.
Yeah,
and
that's
a lot
right.
of non-finished matches. So as soon as you went to the floor, they figured, here it goes. But then you threw the guy in, they knew, hey, it's going to continue, so they would pop. And
they went in the opposite.
Baba was giving them.
They went in the opposite direction of America, whereas they did for years countouts and hokey finishes, so they wouldn't have to beat any of their stars because they were guest stars all the time. But then Baba realized that was bad and went to all clean finishes. And for the rest of the time All Japan was in business, they did winners and losers, and it led to their best business. And America's gone in the opposite direction.
That's the only way to build your business. This is for promoters and people, winners and losers. You have to have winners and you have to have losers. And that's just it. And like you said, and one of the things that helped Baba in the 80s was this. Tenyu, one of his stars, went opposition and took all the young Japanese guys with him, except for about 6 Japanese guys. Misawa stayed, Kawada stayed, Sensafuki had went. I'm trying to think. And what happened was he started having to bring 20 Americans over. Because I remember being on one of those first tours when that happened, the Japanese people was counting us, and it just popped it even more, and it was drawing big time because Baba was bringing in all these American guys. You know, I mean, granted, and the one thing
it was hard to sustain. It was hard to keep up.
Yeah, it was. It was hard to sustain because the Japanese people, they wanted to see Japanese wrestle American guys. It's just like what would happen here. They wanted to hope that the Japanese guys would end up beating the American guys and everything. And like you said, it just didn't sustain. But going back to Inoki and talking about him fighting that more MMA style, he's really the father of MMA. Because when Ivan Koloff, when you started Smoky Mountain Wrestling, and me and Ivan had that school over there in Indian Trails, we were training guys, and they were going over fighting in the first MMA fights for Inoki and them. I don't know if I ever told you that or not.
Yeah, no, I remember a couple of the guys because I ended up using a couple of guys for TV that I think that you had, but
yeah, you did.
And that was the thing that Inoki had tried to, and now everybody talks about it as the birth of mixed martial arts, the match with Ali, but he had always, after that was the most high profile, and it stunk. But then what he did to redeem himself in Japan was he brought in all those other guys that would work with him, like Everett Eddy, the kickboxer, the karate guy, and all had all those different mixed matches, and kind of after the fact, at least in Japan, established the idea that he was the badass because he could beat all these fighters from other disciplines. So that actually worked for him in the long run. But boy, it took a fucking while.
Sure it did, to establish it and this and that and everything. You're exactly right. And
that was why the Japanese people they loved the wrestling heroes, because they could believe in them. The Americans were these crazy badasses, and their natives were the toughest in the world. And I hate to see that now, because it's the same thing in Japan as it is in America with the money. Also, we talked about if the top guys, Baba and Inoki, were both running full-time companies and bringing in Americans. Right. And Baba, we know, could afford to pay his, because we've talked to him. And they were telling us at the time, afford to pay his top Americans $10,000, $12,000, $15,000 a week, and still run his company, and they were making money hand over fist. And I wonder if anybody's going over and making, except Jericho, is making that. What would it be now? $40,000 a week or $35,000 a week?
Sure.
At this point,
it's
the
amazing.
money's gone down when they've devalued the idea of the star power and the credibility of their top guys. Now everybody can be on the show, and there's fewer talents to choose from.
And not only that, listen to this, Jimmy. There are guys now buying their own plane tickets to get to Japan just to wrestle there.
I talked to somebody that one time, it may have been the OVW guys. I think I told somebody this story recently, may have been on a program. But a couple of the guys, this was like 6-7 years ago somewhere, said, we're going to Australia. Right. I said, well, who booked you in Australia? So-and-so, I'd never heard the name. And I said, well, said, good money, go all the way to Australia? Well, we're going to wrestle every night, and we're getting $700 a week, but we get to see Australia. I'm like, fuck. Okay.
I hear you. That's the bad thing about it. Going back to what they're calling this Japanese wrestling strong style, right?
Yes.
Well, now it's the same thing that Jimmy, that the Midnight Express and the Fantastics did night after night, and all of us on the card. It's the same stuff. And what I mean by that is, some things might look like it. You understand what I'm saying?
Yeah.
But Lord Blears told me when he first started going to Japan way back in the 40s, he said that they would be on a train, they'd get off. Half the crew had broken legs and broken arms. I'm talking about Japanese guys. So they would be getting ready to go to the next town. Another train would come and bring more Japanese wrestlers. So the guys the guys, not the top guys, but the guys on the bottom, all the way mid-card, was shooting.
when they
top
first
guys and the American guys would be working.
When they first brought Brian, help me out. Who was the first tour? The Sharp brothers were on the first tour, right? But do you know the promoter's name? I used to, Ben and Mike Sharp, but I used to know who was the promoter that first. Was it Bobby Bruns?
I was going to say Bobby Bruns, but I'm not sure. The fact that you're questioning it makes me question it, but it was definitely the Sharp brothers.
Yeah, and it was the early 50s, and they took American pro wrestling over there, and they like you said, they had locals that I guess they didn't smarten up, because they just took a few top Americans to tour, and then that's when they found Ricky Dozan, and they said, we have a gold mine, because in the Pfeffer collection, the Jack Pfeffer papers, I think is a letter that I've seen from Bobby Bruns that said something to the effect of, wrestling in Japan can be a gold mine if we can find a Japanese star, something of that nature.
That's right.
And that's how they ended up doing it. But they're sending those guys out there to just beat the shit out of each other, because nobody's ever seen this shit before, and they don't know what they're doing anyway.
Right.
Oh, it's fucking great.
And then the top guys are working.
And, well, that's almost the way that's almost the way it's turned out 70 years later, or whatever, these days.
Yeah.